Coming up on the show, the state of Georgia is sitting on a $16.5 billion budget surplus, how one person wants that money to be spent. Plus, the debate over data centers here in Metro Atlanta are getting heated up. We're examining how much of an impact they leave on the environment. And there's a new life being pumped into one iconic slice of downtown Atlanta. This is The Take. Let's get it. Hello and welcome. I'm Chesley McNeil, and this is The Take, where we go above and beyond the headlines. We look at the why and how stories are impacting you and your community. We invite the experts in, of course, to give their take on today's top stories, and we try to have just a little bit of fun as well. All right, let's start you off with this. Earlier this year, Governor Brian Kemp signed off on the state budget for the 25-26 fiscal year. The $37 billion plan includes millions for public safety, healthcare, and transportation, as well as a $13.6 billion for public schools. But one group in the state is urging lawmakers to consider revisiting the budget because of the federal education funding cuts. In a letter sent last week, Vidalia Turner, president of the Georgia Federation for Teachers, called on leadership in the state and the House, the Senate and the House, to tap into the state's $16.5 billion budget reserves. She said, in part, are there any constitutional reasons that a meeting could not be requested and called with Governor Kemp to revisit this budget in order to fund local school districts and in areas affected by the cuts in the federal budget? Joining us now is Vidalia Turner. She is the president of the Georgia Federation for Teachers. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much. Good morning.
All right. That letter was brief, right? So go ahead and expand a little bit on your request to lawmakers and explain why you think this is in the best interest of the state.
Well, the school systems and the state's fiscal budget ended for last year on the 30th of June, and it began on July 1st of 2025, the day that President Trump decided to announce that he was cutting, which amounts to about $201 million plus to the state of Georgia's education funds. This state has about a $16 billion surplus, and it is constitutional. We found out for 2/3. We would need 2/3 of the House and Senate to agree to come into special session and revisit the distribution of that budget to our public schools, or the governor, which is Governor Brian Kemp, we're about to write him a letter, could do the same thing.
I was going to ask you, where does that stand now? Now that you know that it is constitutional, where do you stand on that now?
Well, we're going to push for the governor and the people who are the leaders at the Senate and the House to call that special session. Mm-hmm. Now, I have to admit, we aren't hopeful for that. And one of the reasons we're not hopeful, that yesterday a letter went out by the Superintendent Woods saying that teachers would be paid. And well, that's great that they're going to be paid, but some of that money comes from the state. Mm-hmm. And there are other programs that are at stake. You might get paid, but you also may get cut. Your job might get cut. Right. So that's not what's being said. We know that part of that $16 billion budget has gone in some tax refunds, and we don't want the voters to get too happy. We aren't. We really just don't want them to get content, because we know that the only certainty that we have is uncertainty. Mm-hmm. We have been blindsided on July 1st by the Trump administration. Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned maybe even job cuts, but where do you think the squeeze will be the most with this federal funding cut?
Well, the children who need it most, like in Title II programs and English as second official language learners, ESOL, beginning programs at the beginning of the day and after school programs. See, children who are from families, and that's middle class kids now, and even those who don't enjoy that kind of income, those are the ones that's going to lose tutorial services and special aids and paraprofessionals, their teacher training where teachers need it, because, we really have a shortfall of teachers in this state. Mm-hmm. There are programs we have. Some schools have pre-K, and that's not funded by the state or mandated by the state. There are other programs in the morning that enrich the lives of our children and help them with homework and sessions to understand math and reading and basics, etc. Those things will be cut, and districts will be scrambling to make up that shortfall. Districts have to pay for higher prices and everything, infrastructure, gasoline, etc., higher salaries. So now we're going to be squeezed even more.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. I was going to ask you, do you think you have enough to backfill some of those losses? Doesn't sound like you do, but do you think that it must come from the state level?
Well, yeah, it's going to have to come from the state. at this particular point, and the state is going to have to be prioritized. This is one of the other reasons, Chelsea, that we are against all types of education, voodoo education. And I'm just going to say it out loud. Vouchers. Vouchers were pushed by this governor, and vouchers have nothing to do with academic performance. We see what's happening in Arizona. We see what's happening in Texas. Yet and still, the state has allocated money for special schools, for special interests, and we can't afford to do it at taxpayers' expense.
Yeah, we understand that there's a $16.5 billion reserve. How much of that do you think you would need to make this work?
201 million. That's what we are affected by. We have 180 school districts, and each one of them, let's say if that was just $1 million plus for each one of them, although that's not equitably distributed. Look, the state could easily do it. They could easily do it. Just go into the reserve. And as long as our governor, and I'm not trying to go into his politics, is supporting President Trump, then if you're going to support his policies, then you fund the cuts to Georgia with that Georgia budget.
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
You said you're not hopeful, but you are going to push. Do you think some people will have your back on this?
I'm sorry?
Do you think some of these lawmakers will have your back on this? I know you said you weren't hopeful, but you're going to push anyhow. Do you think
we're going to raise it. It's just like any other movement. We're going to keep it going, because if we let it die, then people will go on to something else. The truth is just the truth, and we're going to always tell the truth and let the Georgia voters know the power of the state. And I appreciate being able to do that.
Yeah. Lastly, let me ask you this. If the governor and the lawmakers don't grant you this, where do you see those first cuts being, or where do you have to kind of make up for, like, right off the bat?
Oh, my God. They're going to have the school districts are going to have to choose to cut down on services. They may even increase class sizes more. Special needs students would greatly be affected. The services would just flat be cut. And in fact, some schools may be closed. And there may be layoffs or firings, but it will get worse before it gets better.
Gotcha. All right, President Turner, really appreciate you joining us. Thanks for your insight this morning as well.
Thank you so much.
All right, have a great day.
All right, thank you.
All right, it's going to be hot out there today, folks. Make sure you dress accordingly. I'm thinking like your white shirt, okay, some tan pants, light color, loose fitting to let the air go through. It's going to be that kind of day where it's very hot on the outside. Even though you have on those light short sleeve shirts and shorts, you want to bring the rain gear, because we're going to have some scattered showers and thunderstorms popping up on us as we head into the afternoon. Now, it'll become a little bit more widespread by tomorrow and into Thursday and Friday. We got a 50% chance both Thursday and Friday. Notice how the temperature trends downward as our chance for rain starts to go up. As we head into the weekend, you're looking at a 20% chance, so that temperature starts to go back up again. I do think these percentages will fluctuate over the next couple of days. Of course, we will be here to keep you updated on all that, let you know what you need to do. Hey, you're watching The Take, man. We'll be right back right after this with more. Welcome back to the show. President Donald Trump turning his attention now to international issues. He had dinner with the Israeli Prime Minister and discussed bringing an end to the 21-month fighting in Gaza. Joining us now is NBC Washington correspondent Alice Barr, who's been covering politics for years now. And Alice, President Trump has sounded pretty confident about his chances for some peace, but Israel is still focused on Hamas and those hostages still in the mix. How close really are we to a breakthrough in Gaza?
Yeah, so Chesley, we know that negotiations have resumed, and they were on ice for a while there. So certainly there's positive news if there's any talks underway, even if there are kind of indirect talks between Israel and Hamas. And President Trump, I think, does see a moment here when he wants to capitalize on momentum from the U.S. having forged a ceasefire between Israel and Iran after the U.S. entered that conflict with Israel against Iran with the nuclear strikes. And so having calmed the fighting there, I think he and many others see this as a moment to really pivot attention to Gaza and to finally bring an end to 21 months of just devastating violence in that strip there. And so the president is projecting optimism that a ceasefire could be close. He said he didn't think there was any holdup, that things are going along very well. But in reality, we know that the central sticking point remains, which is that Hamas wants a full end to the war in these negotiations in exchange for the remaining hostages. And Israeli leadership has not backed away from saying that Hamas needs to be eliminated, that that is their ultimate ultimate objective there. Those two things do not go together, and that remains the sticking point that has always prevented the next phase of a ceasefire, the next phase of hostages being able to be released.
All right, let's shift focus here a little bit. Go to the trade. 25 to 40% tariffs on major partners like South Korea and Japan. No small threat there. How are these countries reacting to these final offer letters?
Yeah, so South Korea's trade ministry said early this morning that it's going to accelerate negotiations with the U.S. to come up with a mutually beneficial deal before that 25% tax on its exports goes into effect. And that new date that it would go into effect is August 1st. The Japanese prime minister on Tuesday, early today, called President Trump's decision, quote, extremely regrettable, but said that the announced tariff rate was actually lower than what President Trump had previously threatened, and said that it would make it still possible to have further negotiations before the August 1st deadline. So neither of them is happy, but both of them are saying we're going to keep negotiating and try to come up with something before this deadline. And that is what we heard from the Treasury Secretary, who said that since this latest round of announcements came out, he said he's gotten a lot of other messages from people reaching out and saying, OK, let's come up with a deal. Certainly that's President Trump's approach to try to increase the pressure, and hope that that comes to an agreement before he actually has to follow through with these pretty punishing rates.
Yeah. President says he has deals coming, but Wall Street not exactly cheering that news. What's the administration's plan to ease the market jitters?
Yeah, so we saw stocks drop yesterday when all of the letters started coming out about these potentially high tariffs once again. It's been a while since we've been in that territory. Markets don't like that because that could increase prices for U.S. consumers. That could drive down buying power here in the U.S. It could just harm American businesses who have to pay to import whatever materials they might need, even if they're based here in the U.S., they might need to import materials from some of these countries and have more costs in the making. But that's where the Treasury Secretary came through and said, don't worry, this is going to be kind of short-term pain, that we're going to have trade deals. The markets like it when there are trade deals announced, because that means that these big sweeping tariffs don't actually go into effect. And so we're hearing promises from the administration that more of those are coming.
All right. Good stuff, Alice. Thanks so much. We'll see you again tomorrow. All right. A recent flight from Atlanta to Florida had to make an emergency landing due to smoke in the filling up where the passengers were. We're going to talk about what caused that coming up. All right, you're looking at Hartsfield-Jackson, one of the biggest airports in the world right there. A Delta flight took off from there yesterday and was forced to make an emergency landing, all due to a lithium battery. Delta Flight 1334 took off from Hartsfield-Jackson for Fort Lauderdale. However, a lithium battery belonging to a passenger ignited inside of a carry-on bag. The flight, with 185 passengers and 6 crew members on board, was forced to make an emergency landing in Fort Myers. Fortunately, there were no injuries reported. This is the latest incident to draw attention to the potential hazards for bringing lithium batteries on flights. Don't want to do that, right? Or make sure they're loose or whatever you have to do to make sure they're safe. Here with us is Emory Professor Rajiv Garg. And Rajiv, welcome back to the show, first of all.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. We carry phones, tablets, even those little power-up banks with us all the time right here on the surface. What makes a lithium battery so much of a fire risk in midair?
So the lithium batteries they have a very high power density or charge density. So as a result, if there's any damage, a short that happens with the battery, they can catch very high temperature fires midair. The issue is more in midair is because they're not kept in the plane side with the air cooling around. For example, like when you're flying, you're either keeping them in the pocket, in the backpack, or in the back of a seat pocket. They're always covered with something that makes the heat not escape or dissipate as easily, so making the chance of fire higher during the flight.
Would this be the same underneath the plane where the bigger luggage is stored? Is that the same concept?
Correct. So, but it's not the check-in. So you're not allowed to check in a battery in the check-in bag, but you have to carry on because in the check-in, if it catches fire, nobody can control it.
Right.
And then you have only 15 minutes, approximately. That's the numbers shared to land the plane. Whereas in the cabin, if there is a fire, somebody sees it, the air crew is trained to control the fire in most cases.
Certainly these devices are charging up faster. We're getting bigger batteries, that kind of thing. Are we moving toward a new area when it comes to airline safety here? Will people just have to hold that maybe while they're sitting in their seats?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, a lot of the seat back pocket is made with mesh where you put the battery pack in there or the battery in there, and it's not going to cause huge like heating problem for those battery packs, etc. That would be a good thing. So, I mean, yes, we are in an era where maybe the aircrafts will start providing some pockets which allow the heat to be, the battery packs to be cooled down when being used on the flight.
You know, what you're saying, it makes a lot of sense. I remember some video of a person carrying their cell phone in their pocket and it catching on fire because of the same thing, right? Not enough air to really cool the battery down. So when it starts to heat up, you say it catches on fire. These incidents happening more on planes, obviously, than any place else. I mean, you think they'll be banned from planes, or is more of the just carrying it so we can see it?
So I think the issue is, like you mentioned, the devices that we're using are becoming much more bigger. They're consuming a lot more power. The battery packs are becoming bigger. The iPad, the phones, they're also becoming more powerful, as a result requiring more batteries over time. In addition, we are buying those charging cables, and I mean, sometimes the cables break. We put a tape on it, we still continue using it. Those are the hazard, because if you have that the cable for charging connected to a power bank that shorts midair, and you don't realize it because it's essentially in your backpack, that is likely to cause fire. So as we go forward, I mean, I think the airlines, like I think Southwest Airline has a regulation that the power bank should be in plain sight. It shouldn't be locked up in your overhead bin, so you can't see what is happening with those devices.
So is that the advice you would give to travelers, just to make sure they just hold on to it instead of putting it?
Yeah. I would say keep the power bank in the seat back pocket if you are using it, and keep checking on it regularly that it's not overheating for whatever reason. Make sure the cable that you're using is not damaged or broken or cracked. And if you are not using it, make sure the things are powered up, not like in a safe mode or. And then there's some power banks that has like the extra plugs, I mean, the terminals. Maybe it's better to put a tape on it, so in case some wire or some metal just goes in and shorts the connectors as well.
Man, all good stuff today. Professor Garve, really appreciate you joining us, and thanks for the insight.
Thank you.
All right, have a great day. All right. Many people are partaking less in human interaction, thanks to social media, of course, and now people are paying to keep it that way. We're going to talk about this right after the break. You want to stay tuned right there for this one. All right, welcome back to the show. There is a growing trend in consumer spending. Get this, paying to avoid social interaction. Can't wait to hear why this is the case. Let's bring in friend of the show, Morgan Ward. Welcome back to the show, Morgan.
Good morning, Chesley.
All right, talk to me about this one. Why are people willing to pay money to avoid human interaction?
Because human interaction can be exhausting, and also it can be. You're constantly engaging, asking people how they are, and engaging with people you don't know. And then there's other aspects too, like your tipping. So we already talked about how exhausting tipping can be and confusing tipping can be. So when you're doing it yourself, you're generally not tipping. Plus you have more control over the entire experience. You know, you can decide how fast or slow you go, what payments you use, and you're not being asked extra questions. So people are paying up to 40% more to avoid it. And McDonald's and Panera are adding more self-serve kiosks, so retailers are noticing.
The world is becoming more isolated. Now, before I ask another question, are you of the school of isolation, or do you like the social interaction?
I'm the isolation school. I think introverts are. I really do. You know, every experience with someone else is extra energy out. So just limiting those can sometimes just feel like a break.
But what are we giving up in the process, Morgan?
I can't help it. I like to have my alone time while I'm shopping.
I'm going to leave it alone. I'm going to leave it alone. I think you young folks, enjoy your isolation. I like people. I like to interact. And you have a job where you have to do that, so I'm a bit confused by that. But remember when Sunday newspapers were stuffed with coupons? What happened to that ritual? What happened to the coupons?
People are really cutting down on coupons, even as consumers are a little more nervous about the economy. So in 2010, there were 330 billion coupons used, and by 2023, 170 billion coupons used, which means we're down to about half, and people are only redeeming about 1% of the coupons that they could. So even though people are concerned about finances, they're finding other ways to save money.
So is it more about tech, or is it more about a changing lifestyle, or are we just too busy now to try to chase down these deals?
It's sort of all three of those. So there's other ways to save money. People are leaning into redeeming points and loyalty cards. Also, it's a lot of coordination, basically coordination. You have to organize it. You have to remember to use the coupons. So people are valuing their time over money savings, especially in Gen Z, which we know. So that's how the changing and the shifting is for saving money as well. Gotcha.
All right. Finally, how are brands using scent to tap into memory and emotions in ways that billboards and jingles just can't do anymore?
Well, a lot of brands that we associate scent with, like Auntie Anne's or Bath and Body Works, are starting to sort of bottle up that scent and make their internal scent that you associate with the brand into things like soaps and perfumes. And the reason is because scent is so potent and we so quickly relate it to retail experiences and just any experience. If you get exposed to some scent from your childhood, you'll know how quickly you can connect that with a personal memory or experience, because it happens so quickly in the brain, that relationship between what you smell and an experience you've had.
You know, when you said both those, you said Auntie Anne's and then you said Bath and Body, I instantly got those smells in my head. That's pretty good. So maybe they're on to something there, maybe. Yeah. But this loss of social interaction, Morgan, I can't get with it. I don't understand.
Extroverts, they do not understand.
We're going to have to change that. We're going to have to change it. Morgan Ward, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate your insight.
Thank you so much.
All right, take care. Data centers continue to grow despite the impacts on the environment, plus renovations to one of Atlanta's treasures. Stick around. We're going to talk about it coming up after the break. Welcome back. A recent report on data center trends show that Atlanta has surged to become the second largest data center market in the world in terms of inventory capacity. As these information hubs continue to pop up, concerns over protecting the environment keep rising as well. Joining us now is Dan Diorio. He's the Vice President of the State Policy for Data Center Coalition. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Why is Georgia such a magnet for these data center constructions, and how does that fit into the national tech infrastructure map?
Well, it's important to remember that data centers are everything we do every day. It's how we work, it's how we learn, it's how we communicate. It's buying groceries, it's streaming content, but it's our bank accounts and our healthcare records. Georgia has become a central market for data center development for a variety of reasons. One is a vibrant tech workforce, a vibrant construction workforce, access to reliable energy, access to reliable land, and also Georgia being the number one, if not one of the top states to do business in the country.
I guess that's a good thing, but we've been hearing lately how these data centers has been getting a lot of pushback based on the, and even here in the metro area, based on the noise that they generate, the heat, the water problems that they get, overall safety. What do you say about these critiques?
Well, I think data centers are very responsible users of the inputs that go into their facilities, and they're committed to responsible development in the communities in which they locate, obviously, including in the metro Atlanta area. It's important to keep lines of communication open, between residents, between local leaders, between utilities and regulators. But data centers are committed to being responsible energy and water users. In particular, they're prioritizing advanced cooling systems, sustainable water management practices, access and increased renewable energy, as well as additional energy efficient technologies. Those are some of the top inputs that go into the facility, and data centers have a built-in incentive to use them very responsibly and wisely.
Last week, Dan, we talked about this very topic. We talked to Dr. Andrew Chin. He's from the University of Chicago about the rise of data centers. We asked him what would be the smartest way to build these data centers and what would be best for our communities. Here's what he had to say.
I think communities should band together and insist that the data center is environmentally responsible, and they might want to negotiate some kinds of contribution to community. I think they're sometimes called community benefit agreements.
Yeah.
To ensure that some of the value and the employment of this digital bonanza that's happening comes to the community where the data centers are hosting it.
Dan, what's your reaction to what Dr. Chin had to say?
Well, data centers are an economic driver, and they've been an economic driver in Georgia, contributing over $25 billion to Georgia's GDP, employing over 176,000 workers across Georgia, and bringing back over $1 billion in state and local tax revenue. Data centers are an economic driver for Georgia, and they will continue to be one. And so I think it's important to remember that they are a central piece of maintaining our U.S. global competitiveness as we look at the rise of digital infrastructure and artificial intelligence across the globe. But also they're an essential part of our national security as well. We want our data secured here, safe and securely domestically.
Yeah. Do you realistically think Georgia could lead the way on climate smart data infrastructure?
Again, I think Georgia is very much leading the way in data center development and realizing those economic benefits. And I think continued open conversations between the industry, between communities, utilities, regulators, local leaders, and state lawmakers is important to ensure that we can continue to keep Georgia a top state for business, a top state for data center development, while also working with the industry to realize all the responsible and sustainable practices that it's already using in the state of Georgia.
All right, Dan, thanks so much for your insight today, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, take care. All right, let's take a look outside, folks. It is starting to heat up a little bit on us there. We do have some cumulus clouds on the outside, or starting to form at least. Those are some high clouds. The sun's shining right through those, so we're looking pretty good. In fact, you're looking at, from DeKalb County here, a camera from DeKalb County looking at downtown Atlanta. It looks pretty good, pretty good. We have some blue sky out there, so we'll have plenty of sunshine around. Now, later on this afternoon, there could be an isolated shower or a thunderstorm that begins to pop up. So make sure you grab your rain gear, folks. You may need that. 95 degrees will be your afternoon high temperature for today. You know, it's a place many Atlantans remember for its music, its culture, and history, but now the underground Atlanta is seeing a dramatic rebirth. Here now is Shanil Leilani, the CEO of Leilani Ventures. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, talk about the importance of underground Atlanta and what it means for the city to have it be a cultural hub.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to put in words, but this is where the city started, right? We have the 0 mile marker having here on the property. So this is where it all began. And underground has been the center of the hub in Atlanta. And I would say early on, right? We all know in early 2000s, this was the place to be. We're quickly turning that place again for the place to be, right? I mean, I bought this property in 2020, about 5 years ago. It was around 10% occupied at that time. And quickly over the last few years, we worked hard and, leased up the places, hosted a lot of events. We're at 80% occupancy right now.
Wow.
We welcomed over 1 million people last year. We're on pace to welcome 2 million people this year.
Congratulations on the growth right there. To 2020, you had a vision. You said 10% occupied. What was your vision back then for where it would be today?
I mean, the vision has always been that we need density here, right? This is a 4-block, 12-acre property here in the middle of the city. You're next to the busiest MARTA station, the transit station, 5 Points. You're right across Georgia State University. You're next to the city halls, all the government buildings, right? So the vision has always been like, how do we put density on this property? We have 12 acres. We have buildable rights to go up to 10 million square feet. So while it's so challenging and difficult to make vertical construction work in today's market, we're working on activating the property, right? Going, leasing up, filling up every space that we have available, and then be patient for the market to come back where the interest rate, the construction costs can come down so we can afford to, go vertical and, put apartments here, put condos, office buildings, hotels. We're committed to have some apartments into workforce housing and affordable housing as well. So for us to make those work, we have to be patient to to make sure the interest rate and the construction cost comes down.
Yeah. Sunil, was nightlife the key here? You got you got a massive nightclub there, MJQ there. You got Revine as well. Was nightlife the key?
So nightlife has always been the key for this property. If you look at 20 years ago, 30 years ago, right, all the clubs and pubs used to be here. So when I bought the property, honestly, that wasn't the vision, but that's what, garnished, or that's what really attracted a lot of attention, where we were getting a lot of calls from club owners and nightlife owners, business owners, where they wanted to have their place over here. And as a businessman, right, I have to really look at like what's really gonna work for us, right, while we're patiently waiting for the vertical development to happen. We had to fill up these spaces, and I think it worked out perfectly.
Yeah, yeah. What has been the challenges for you putting all that right there in downtown? You talk about housing, you talk about the stores, obviously, and nightlife. What has been some of the challenges for you?
I mean, there's numbers challenges, just like any other development, but downtown has a lot more, right? I mean, historically, people have invested their dollars, developers have invested dollars into Midtown and Buckhead, and downtown has really been neglected, right? So I think this time around, that's not the story anymore, right? You have Centennial Yards here, you have a couple of other developers that are really laser focused on this part of downtown, where I think all those challenges that we were seeing many years ago are gonna be different this time around.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we got World Cup coming in 2026. What do you guys have coming as well? What's the future like for that area?
Yeah, we're actively working with all the stakeholders here to plan for World Cup, but even beyond that, right? We're using the World Cup as I would say, like a milestone, but also it's not just finishes there, right? It marches on and it continues. But we're going to be hosting a lot of pre-parties, watch parties, after parties. We're literally 2 blocks away from the games, right? We actually hosted a Club World Cup watch party just last week, where we had a lot of people show up. So that was just like we're trying things out and preparing ahead. We have a lot more tenant announcements that we're going to be making over the next few months, but we're going to be close to full occupancy here by the World Cup.
All right. Sunil Leilani, thanks so much for joining us, and thanks for all the work you're doing down there to bounce Atlanta back, the underground in particular.
Thank you.
All right, thanks so much. All right, folks, the process that slows you down at those TSA checkpoints could be going away. You're watching The Take. We're back right after this. All right, welcome back to the show. TSA could be ditching a policy we've been following for decades. CNN's Maribel Aber joins us now from the NASDAQ market site in New York. Good morning to you, Maribel. And this could be a major change for our airport routine, right?
Hey, good morning, Chesley. A big change for clearing security at the airport after nearly 20 years. Flyers will no longer need to take their shoes off at airport security lines. Media reports say the TSA is phasing out the shoes off requirement at airports around the country. And at some airports, the requirement has already been dropped. Travel newsletter Gate Access was the first to report that move. The TSA has, though, not officially announced a change in policy just yet. Flyers have been required to remove shoes since 2006. That was about 5 years after a terrorist tried to detonate explosives packed in his shoe. Now, the question is, what does this shift mean for the TSA's PreCheck program? Keeping your shoes on is one of the features PreCheck has. The program costs around $80 for 5 years and offers expedited screening. Chesley, I paid $80, so I didn't have to wear socks.
Same here, same here. I don't like to take the shoe off thing, so changing that would be key. And it'll move people faster, I think. All right, so Tesla is has taken a hit in the market, but the CEO is eyeing a new political challenge.
And that new political challenge is why shares of Tesla were battered yesterday. The big drop came after Elon Musk said he was starting a new political party. Musk said he was forming the America Party, which could focus on congressional races. Now, one Wall Street analyst said investors are tiring of Musk's move into politics at a crucial point for Tesla. The company reported a 14% year-on-year decline in car deliveries last quarter and faces rising competition, especially in China. Yesterday, Tesla shares dropped nearly 7%. That knocked off more than $68 billion in the company's market value. As for how investors feel about Musk's political activities today, looks like Tesla shares right now, well, they were up a little bit earlier. They look to be up almost 1%, Chesley.
All right. Speaking of Tesla, car buyers are setting a new record.
Monthly payments on new auto loans keep soaring. More than 19% of new vehicle buyers last quarter took on loans with a monthly payment of $1,000 or more. That's an all-time high and up from 17.8% a year ago, according to Edmunds.com. Now, the average monthly payment was $756, up $16 from a year ago, and the percentage of new auto buyers taking out loans for 7 years or longer soared to a record high of 22.4% last quarter. Now, Edmunds says buyers are trying various ways to manage affordability. That includes taking on longer loans, financing more, or putting less money down. But some of those may increase the total cost of the vehicle. Something to think about, Chesley.
Yeah, we'll be thinking about that. All right, a couple of weeks ago, we saw Uber launch its self-driving cars using Waymo here in Atlanta, but they're now about to launch in another major city.
Yes, well, of course, as you mentioned, you can get one of those autonomous vehicles right there in Atlanta. Now Waymo is rolling out its fleet of test vehicles in Philadelphia. The cars from the autonomous driving company will have specialists operating the vehicles during the test period. Now, Waymo says its cars will be in neighborhoods everywhere from North Philly to University City, as well as operating in the city's freeways. The vehicles are not available to the public, but Waymo uses this sort of test period as a way to learn a city's streets and traffic. The company collects mapping data to evaluate how its autonomous technology performs in new environments and handle traffic patterns. And it will help Waymo gauge whether it can potentially offer a paid ride share service in a particular location. Right now, Waymo provides more than 250,000 fully autonomous paid trips each week in cities like San Francisco, Phoenix, LA, Austin, of course, Atlanta, and Chesley. You know, look, if you don't have a car, I mean, car payments are averaging, what do we say, $756 a month now?
Yeah.
Is it cheaper than an Uber or Lyft and more frequent than a bus? Will I trust the robot?
Yeah. Do you have Waymo there in New York yet?
We do not.
Oh.
Not yet. I haven't tried it yet.
And
But I still feel like it needs some tests.
Yeah, and I'm concerned about some of these northeastern cities with Waymo, you know, testing it out. I'm from Philly, so I'm a little concerned there, you know what I mean? So we'll see. We'll see.
A lot of traffic.
That's absolutely right. All right, Maribel, thanks so much for joining us.
You got it.
All right, chicken sludge is a concern in one Georgia county. We're going to get the details when we come back. Stay right there. All right, a creek in Taliaferro County was contaminated by a state-endorsed soil amendment. Specifically, we're talking about chicken sludge, following a spill from a lagoon or a waste pond in Williams Creek, into Williams Creek. This now has sparked local concern over the state's soil amendment policies. Joining us now is Tanya Bontabatabas. Am I saying that right?
It's fine. Bonatatabas.
Bonatatabas. Okay, there you go. We got it. The Executive Director of Savannah River Keepers. Welcome to the show, Tanya.
Thank you for having me.
All right, I tried. I'm sorry about that last name, but
I love it.
when you first heard about this, right, this fish kill, what went through your mind as someone who monitors Georgia's waterways daily?
Here comes another one. So this is a chronic issue with how we deal with the waste that we're generating from our animal production industry in Georgia. Chicken is #1 industry in Georgia, and all of that waste has to go somewhere. And unfortunately, that somewhere is these rural fields, not processed. And so this is not the first fish kill, and this is actually not the first issue at this site specifically.
So are you seeing this as a warning sign to the entire sludge program that needs reform in our area?
Well, for sure. We need to go back into the rulemaking on this program. This program has been a pretty big chronic nuisance, particularly for the northeastern part of the state for 11, 12 years, and we've been getting continually better. But unfortunately, even after we changed the law 2 years ago, there still isn't the stop work order or apparently the teeth to make sure that these guys are maintaining and running properly. So we're talking about an old hog farm that was the cause of this, that had a lagoon that they're bringing 30, 40, 18-wheelers a week and just dumping into this lagoon and then just spreading out on the ground. No treatment. It is as putrid as it sounds. It is absolutely awful for the people that live around it. And then to top it off, in this instance, the lagoon ran over and went into the creek. That creek actually then goes into the Little River that goes into Strom-Thurmond, which is the largest lake east of the Mississippi River. So there are drastic impacts with the way that this waste is managed. The big problem is that the state can't figure out how to turn it off because we want to keep eating chicken, right? But that chicken, the waste has to go somewhere. And so if they stop taking it, then they have to stop processing the chicken. So There's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Yeah, it's big business for us. How dangerous would you say this sludge spill can be, not only for wildlife, but for people that live around the stream and downstream?
Well, beyond the spill, just the act of having this applied to the ground untreated makes the life of the person living next door absolutely miserable. We just had another site in Tignall, Georgia, which is in Wilkes County, where these guys it took 4 years, I think, to get them to stop. But if you live next door to this, or if you happen to be next to Grimes Hog Farm, actually is a retreat center, you can't live there if it's going on. There's flies, there's buzzards, it's pretty putrid. It's like living next to a gut pile.
Wow.
Is what it is.
So what recourse do you have if you live there? Like, what can you do if you live there and you want this to stop? You have to report it, obviously, but how do you do that?
Well, you're supposed to report it to the Department of Agriculture, and they're supposed to go out and investigate. You have the Environmental Protection Division that can step in once there's a fish kill. So this is an instance where the EPD was able to step in and actually do some kind of an enforcement. Again, this is the third issue on this site in a couple of years. But the answer is your recourse is not much right now. You can yell and scream. Hopefully your commissioners are helping you do that. Your elected officials are, but until we really get into this rulemaking and make sure that we're holding people accountable, unfortunately, all you can do is make your voice known.
Any concern from you that these kinds of incidents erode people's public trust on any state-led environmental initiatives that are working well?
Well, 100%, right? So if we want to continue to grow and be this industry that is animal agriculture, you have to make sure you're doing that sustainably. And it really does it puts a black mark on everything if this is how we're maintaining, and especially our rural Georgia lands, which are supposed to be, this is the home of ag. So we need to do a much better job making sure we're protecting the people that actually live there. Gotcha.
I'm gonna try this again now. Tanya Bonatatabas.
You nailed it. That was
beautiful. Oh, sweating there a little bit there. Tanya, thanks so much for joining us. Thank you so much for your insight as well. And hopefully people really heard what you had to say today. And if they see that, to report that.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All right. Coming up, folks, we have another look at your forecast, plus my final take is coming up right after the break. Stick around. We're almost there. All right, it's going to be a hot day today. I can't stress that enough. 95 degrees for the high temperature. That's hot enough, right? But when you factor in the humidity, it's going to feel closer to 100, 101, 102 maybe. A few of us will have some relief. We'll get a 30% chance for a few isolated showers to be around during this afternoon. I think after 1, 2 o'clock, we'll start to see those begin to pop up. A lot of us won't see it today. We got to wait till tomorrow. 40% chance for the rain to be around. 93 will be our afternoon high temperature. Of course, it's going to feel much hotter than that, like the upper 90s. You're looking at 50% chance for rain on Thursday and Friday. Temperatures will continue to fall off a little bit because of the extra cloud cover and the potential for the rain. But then that rain chance goes down as we head into the weekend and into next week. So we'll see the reverse. Our temperatures start to go back up again. Looking at 91 degrees on Saturday, Sunday, 93 and 95 by next Monday. All right, before we go, let's get my final take in here. It's that time of the year. You know, many people can't wait for what they consider to be the biggest sale of the year so far. We're talking about Prime Day, folks. It's here. Since 2015, Prime Day has been a huge draw for online shoppers trying to seek that deal. Everything from tech to beauty, from home to kitchen needs. What started as a one-day thing is now turned into 4 days. Although everyone loves the convenience of Amazon, they got fast shipping, easy returns. Better deals, believe it or not, can be found in other places. Truly, Prime Day has changed the game so much that retailers now have begun to compete, which is a good thing for us. It's around this same time that we find these companies offering big discounts. Walmart, Macy's, Lowe's, Best Buy, you name them, right? They're starting to compete with Amazon Prime Day. So a tip from me to you, make sure you compare prices, make sure you check around before you spend that hard-earned cash. For example, you like those sneakers from Adidas? Go to the Adidas website. They may have a bigger discount. Check it out. I do my Christmas shopping around this time of the year. I get her done. Enjoy today, folks.